Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Prime Minister in advance for an advance copy of her statement on this deeply alarming attack that raises very serious questions. The whole House condemns the suspected poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Salisbury, and of course we wish them a return to good health. And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, the whole House will join me in wishing Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey a speedy recovery as well. No member of our police force and nobody on the streets of Britain should ever face such an attack, let alone with chemical weapons. I thank the Prime Minister for updating the House. The investigation into the shocking events in Salisbury must reach its conclusions. We need to see both the evidence and a full account from the Russian authorities in light of emerging evidence that the Prime Minister has just referred to. For now, can the Prime Minister clarify what level of threat it was believed Mr. Skripal faced at the time of the attack, and what security protection, if any, was deemed necessary for him and his daughter? Mr. Speaker, this morning the Conservative Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee said, "I'd be surprised if the Prime Minister did not point the finger at the Kremlin." The honourable member for Tonbridge and Malling also accused the Russian government of behaving in an aggressive and corrupting way in this country. Mr. Speaker, we need to continue seeking a robust dialogue with Russia on all the issues currently dividing our countries, both domestic and international, rather than simply cutting off contact and letting the tensions and divisions get worse and potentially even more dangerous. And Mr. Speaker, we're all familiar with the way huge fortunes, often acquired in the most dubious circumstances in Russia, sometimes connected with criminal elements, have ended up sheltering in London and trying to buy political influence in British party politics. Meddling in elections, as the Prime Minister put it, there has been over £800,000 worth of donations to the Conservative Party from Russian oligarchs and their associates. So, Mr. Speaker, if that is the evidence before the government, even before the investigation into Salisbury is complete, the government could be taking action to introduce new financial sanctions powers. But instead, Mr. Speaker, they are currently resisting Labour's amendments to the Sanctions and Money Laundering Bill, which could introduce the so-called Magnitsky powers. So will the Prime Minister agree today to back those amendments to the Sanctions and Money Laundering Bill? More specifically, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the...
Order. There can be strongly held opinions and inflamed passions, but I do appeal to colleagues whose sincerity and integrity I don't doubt to remember that we hear views and other colleagues will be heard, but the right honourable gentleman must be heard. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More specifically, when it comes to the Salisbury attack, what actions are the local police taking to identify fellow diners at Zizi's restaurant and the Mill pub in Salisbury on the day in question, and ensure they come forward and are checked? What extra resources are being provided to the local police force, which quite understandably have never had to deal with such an incident before? We know that across the country the National Health Service is under incredible pressures at the moment. But what extra resources have been provided to the NHS hospitals in and around Salisbury, and what training has been given to NHS staff and GPs in identifying the symptoms from a nerve agent attack? Mr. Speaker, the events in Salisbury on the 4th of March have appalled the country and need thorough investigation. The local community and public services involved need reassurance and the resources necessary. The action the government takes, once the facts are clear, needs to be both decisive and proportionate, and focused on reducing conflicts and tensions rather than increasing them. I join the Prime Minister in paying tribute to the magnificent work of our public services, responding to this attack, the NHS staff, the police and security services, the armed forces and the analysts from Porton Down. Let us, Mr. Speaker, do everything we can to ensure this never, ever happens again.